And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Now, my friends, somebody needs to tell these government types that they can't continue to schedule meetings during my program. I mean, come on. How are the people supposed to attend your meeting and find out what dastardly things that you're doing and watch my program? Which kind of brings me to a point. I think that they're doing it on purpose. That the very reason why they schedule meetings during the 8 and 10 a.m. hour is to make sure that as few as people possible listen to this program. Well, it certainly worked. Well, it didn't work today. As you can tell, we're back in the original Cowboy State Politics studio. That's because there's one of those crappy government meetings that is happening at about 9 o'clock. And so Agent 29 and I have split our forces. He is attending the meeting, and I, of course, your illustrious host, am here doing what I do. The show must go on, my friends. Welcome to the program. I appreciate you listening. Thank you for watching. I've got a great program set up for you, and it would appear that a studio dog has joined us. Well, her name is Maisie, by the way, if you didn't know. Anyway, so there's been a little bit of shall we call it feedback from yesterday's podcast. And if you haven't listened to it, you need to go back and listen to it. It was a blast to put together, and watching the reaction on social media and X, well, I guess X is social media also, but watching the reaction has been nothing short of tantalizing. It's been incredible. Well, the episode is called Wyoming Education Employees, or Wyoming School Employees Are Being Cheated. And they absolutely are, my friends. Cowboy State Politics obtained a document that shows all of the raises that are going to be given out during the 2025 to 2026 school calendar to all school district employees across the state. And now you remember getting the Wayback Machine and go all the way back to the last legislative session where there was a gigantic debate on the floor about raises. And one of the big problems is the Senate killed the supplemental budget where all of the teacher raises were residing. And so there was a scramble to find out where exactly they could be put. So that, school staff still got a raise, which they absolutely deserve. And so it went into the recalibration bill. Actually, I don't remember the exact title, but it's like Recalibration Bill 2. It's House Bill 316. Now, if you go read it, it says very clearly that the legislature allotted an 8.5% raise to teachers and to what they call non-professional staff. So that would be like your paras, your custodial staff, the lawn crew, the maintenance crew, all of them. Everybody got an 8.5% raise. But if you look at this little document that was prepared by the Legislative Service Office that compiles all of the raises that are going to be given out during this next school year, only one county gave an 8.5% raise, and actually they gave more. That was Sublette County. They gave everybody a 10% raise. Every other county in Wyoming, all the other 22 counties, didn't come anywhere close to giving an 8.5% raise. In fact, some of the counties gave a raise that was just flatly insulting. There was one, I can't remember which one it is. Maybe it's Niobrara. I don't know. But they gave a 0.71% raise. Where's the other 7% of their money? Or there was Johnson County School District, which gave out 2.5%. Hey, where's the other 6% that the legislature promised? Or Teton County, and there was a number of these, but Teton County schools gave a whopping 0% raise. Big fat goose egg. Zero, nilch, nada, nothing. They didn't give their employees jack squat. And I guarantee you, my friends, I guarantee you that the narrative coming out of the school districts and the Wyoming Education Association is going to be those evil legislators. How dare they not give you a raise? You can blame all of them. Well, the truth is, my friends, that the blame rests solely on the shoulders of school districts across the great state of Wyoming. And it is absolutely incredible to go watch the reaction. I got an email last night from a school administrator. I'm actually going to go meet with him, but I'm not going to tell you which school district he's from. But it's, I've been the finance guy for a really long time, and I'd really like to talk to you about your episode. Yeah, I bet you would. Because, it's, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but Cowboy State Politics has, a pretty sizable audience. And that episode, it's been looked at a few times. Not really that many. I don't really think that if you're a school administrator that you should be all that worried about it. Except that that episode's already been looked at about 6,000 times. So, my friends, there's a little bit of explaining. You got some splaining to do, Lucy. Oh, my Lord, my friends. I had such a good time yesterday. I can't tell you. Every time I picked up my phone, there was another belly laugh that came out. It was just absolutely amazing. And my friends, that is why Cowboy State Politics exists, to show you the truth that these school administrators don't want you to see. Don't pay any attention to the guy behind the curtain. No, don't even look at what this other hand is doing. But that's why Cowboy State Politics exists, to show you the truth, show you what's happening in Wyoming, and I certainly did that yesterday. So if you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to yesterday's podcast. It was a lot of fun to make it, and it's been a tremendous amount of fun to watch. Well, on today's first, I guess I should explain to you what happened yesterday with the interview. So Peter Cousins, we had an interview set up with the author of the book Deadwood: Gold, Guns, and Greed in the American West. It's a great book. I'm not through it all the way, but it's one of those history books that doesn't read like a history book. It's a pleasure to read, but it's all about the history of Deadwood. And Peter Cousins has written, I think he's written like 19 books. So I was really excited to talk to him. But we got our little times mixed up, the Eastern time, Mountain time thing. And so we weren't able to do the interview yesterday. However, I've already rescheduled a time with him. It'll be next week, though, late next week, before I get to talk to him. So the interview is still going to happen. We just had a little snafu yesterday. It's what happens with live radio, my friends. Sometimes your wires get crossed, and you just kind of have to adapt. Which I have to say, I did so deftly. But anyway, the Peter Cousins interview, it's still on the schedule. And you know what I might do? And I've been thinking about this. He's going to be in Cody at the Buffalo Bill Museum, really, really soon. So I think I'm going to call him back and see if I can just drive over to Cody and do the interview there. But no promises, but we're still on schedule. You're just going to have to wait a little bit, which will give me time to completely finish the book, which I'm really looking forward to. On today's program, There's a lot of stuff in the news. If you look at the chalkboard behind me, I'm not even kidding. The Democrats are now defending drug runners. Yeah, you remember the Venezuelan drug running boat that the U.S. military took out? Yeah. Yep. Now, Democrats are defending the drug runners. I mean, it's a while ago on the program. I think I was talking to Harriet, and I said, if Donald Trump came out in favor of oxygen, all of the Democrats would just stop breathing. And I mean, it's absolutely the truth. Whatever Trump says is bad, the Democrats say is good. It's just, it's baffling. And then Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, he has figured out who to blame for all of the guns and all of the shootings in Chicago. And it's red states, my friends. Yeah. Don't blame your lack of enforcement. Don't blame your policies. It's the fault of Republican-run states, which, interestingly enough, if you look at most Republican-run states, they really don't have that big of a crime problem, as opposed to like every other Democrat state that absolutely has a gigantic crime problem. So we're going to talk about that. And all those wacko Democrats in Jackson Hole who are so interested in affordable housing, that they had House or Senate File 40 torpedoed. They flew in all their activists and friends from Jackson to torpedo that bill. Well, it turns out they're not really interested in affordable housing either. And so we got to talk about that. It's fascinating. It turns out that the problem with socialism is capitalists. I can't wait to show you this article. They actually printed it in the Jackson Hole News and Guide. So we're going to talk about that one too. And then Senator Sherry Steinmetz has a really good op-ed out. And it's, Senator Sherry, you got to come on the program and we got to talk about it because I think you hit the nail on the head with this one. And it's a really good op-ed. So we're going to talk about that one. And then if we get to it, have you ever wondered why there's all of these nominees from the Trump administration that are just sort of languishing in the Senate? It's like they're kicking back in the green room and, nothing's happening. Well, all of those are the fault of John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader. Yeah. Poop rolls uphill. It's absolutely true. But John Thune could push through all of these nominations whenever he wanted to. The Democrats really don't have a say in it. All he has to do is schedule the votes, and they're off to the races. He could have all 140 votes done in the matter of a month, but he's not. Yeah, he's just not scheduling the votes, which might lead you to believe that maybe John Thune isn't a fan of the president and is kind of working with the Democrats. I don't know. Might be a red coat. There's been a lot of discussion about him. And you know what's funny? It seems like all of the redcoats get elected to leadership positions in Congress. That, if you're a redcoat, it's almost like it's the fast track to congressional leadership. Well, John Thune might be on it, and we're going to talk about that. But first, let's see here. Let me go to my stack of stuff and figure out where I want to start. I think we ought to start with the drug cartels, if you ask me. I think this one is fantastic. And this is an article from, let's see here, I think this is from the Free Press, but I'm sure it'll tell us in the article. But it's entitled, Liberals Pounce to Defend Drug Cartels After Trump Reveals Strike on Drug-Running Gang Members in Venezuela. And I quote, the president said 11 members of Tren de Aragua had died in the strike. Now, Donald Trump revealed a military strike against drug runners in a ship from Venezuela in an offhand comment from the White House, but it led to a curious response from his critics, the Democrats. The president offered few details on the operation to reporters Tuesday, but said that he had been briefed on the strike by General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's basically the actual devil. You can stop playing it safe now, which is what Trump said, you don't mess around with General Kane. His nickname is Raisin Kane, which I think is entirely appropriate. And if I have a general, they have to have a cool nickname like that, like Raisin Kane, Mad Dog, something like that. Well, as it turns out that guy didn't turn out so good for the Trump administration. But anyway, I like Raisin Kane. Trump later released a video of the strike on a post on Truth Social and said that 11 people had died. He said they were members of Tren de Aragua. Quote, please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware, Trump said, but he didn't follow it up with, thank you for your attention to this matter, which, by the way, I think is a wonderful ending line. But the U.S. sent 3 more warships to the seas near Venezuela in order to combat drug cartel activity that occurred in the prior weeks. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, a real piece of crap, called the actions of the U.S., quote, an extravagant, unjustifiable, immoral, and absolutely criminal and bloody threat. Yeah, because his cartel buddies are getting killed. So I guess, yeah, maybe it is a bloody threat. But anyway, on social media, anti-Trump voices pounced to attack the administration and seemingly defend murderous drug cartels. Quote, drug trafficking is a crime, not an act of war. Traffickers must be arrested, not summarily executed, which U.S. forces just recently did. A human rights activist, Kenneth Roth, responded. Here's another one. It is truly insane, quoting now, it is truly insane to me that Trump sent 7 warships and 4,500 troops to Venezuela and just illegally attacked one of their boats. And I have barely heard the media and Democrats even mention it. What would he have to actually do to get you to fight? He's basically the actual devil, and you can't stop playing it safe now, left-wing YouTuber Kyle Kulinski, whoever the heck that is, replied. Continuing, as with Trump's bombing of Iran, his show of force and possible military assault on Venezuela, a country that poses no threat to the U.S., is taking place with no congressional input or approval or public debate. It's pure gangsterism, activist Max Blumenthal reported. Or responded. But I think the point, my friends, is that this is proof that the Democrats are against anything that Trump does. It doesn't matter what it is. If Trump stops drug runners, they're in favor of drug traffickers. If he's in favor of oxygen, they'll stop breathing. It is truly incredible, my friends, and that none of them have the self-awareness to figure out that maybe what they're supporting isn't the right position. Maybe that their Trump derangement syndrome, their absolute obstruction of everything that is Trump, is perhaps misguided and not in favor of the United States of America. And I keep going back to my conversation with Cynthia Lummis's campaign manager, where he said that the Democrats oppose anything with Trump's name attached to it. It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's in President Trump's orbit, they are against it, which means that the Democrats, my friends, are not in favor of helping you, the American citizen, or Wyoming citizen for that matter. Their only mission is to destroy Donald Trump, which they're doing at every turn. And I have to tell you, my friends, they're not leading. And if you even think about voting for one of these Democrats or the people masquerading as Republicans, the redcoats, who are very much not, or a lot of them are never Trumpers, then you need to seriously reconsider your support for them. And again, all you have to do is read the news and just at some point, I mean, some Democrats, I think, yeah, I gotta be careful here because I'm going to say that some Democrats are actually reasonable people. They just have some views that are a little bit left of, say, me. Well, of course, just about everybody is left of me. But anyway, I have coffee with one of the more liberal Republicans in Sheridan every once in a while. And you know what? She and I agree on a lot of stuff. But there are some things on the far right that my friend is never going to go along with, which I, of course, would absolutely be in favor of. But what I'm saying is even people who are liberal are at least reasonable. Not all of them, but I think that most of them are. And if you want to go all the way back to Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan was a conservative, though historically speaking, not as conservative as we, as some of us would like. I mean, we can blame him for some funny business with the National Firearms Act, but he had a pretty good relationship with Tip O'Neill, the head of the Democrats, Speaker of the House, and they were able to get some stuff done and work together. It's kind of one of those things: fight all day long and then go have dinner together, or go have a drink and iron things out. And I have to believe that most Democrats are like that. I've told you several times that I've had numerous conversations with Mike Yen, and I actually like him. I don't agree with pretty much anything he says, but we get along and have a pleasant conversation. If you ask me, one of the best interviews that I've done all year long was with Trey Sherwood. We didn't agree on anything, but we had a heck of a fun time doing it. It's a great interview to listen to and watch. So anyway, my friends, I think my point is that these radical Democrats, they're the ones that are saying, hey, we need to, that are defending the drug traffickers. They're not really there to defend you. They're not really there to defend your way of life or your way of thinking or anything like that. Really, they're there to push their own liberal agenda. And that happens to be oppose everything that is Donald Trump. So now let's see here. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about that op-ed I was mentioning from Senator Steinmetz. And I really think that this is a good one. I read it this morning while I was doing show prep. But she titled it, "Are We Building Economic Development or Creating Wyoming's Next Crisis?" Now, first, before I even get into this, it is not the government's job to create economic development, business development. In fact, I think it's impossible. Here's why. When, let's say that you get a job working for, White Hot. Okay, it's a good job. It works out good for you and your family. You get that white hot paycheck. It's got good benefits with it. The only thing is you might have to plow snow in the middle of the night during winter. But other than that, it's a pretty good gig. You get your white hot paycheck, and when you get it, you can go to the grocery store. You can buy groceries for your family and pay your bills with all your white hot money. But the problem here is that the entirety of your white-hot paycheck is made up of tax dollars, money that has already been taken from other businesses to pay your white-hot paycheck. Now, you're not doing anything wrong. I mean, we got to plow snow too, but you're not really generating any new business in the marketplace because what you're using is recycled tax dollars. And so these government types, they think, well, if we tax people and we take that money and we put it back into the economy, it creates economic development. But what it doesn't. It just keeps a flat line because you're not generating anything new. The only way the market expands is if there is a new service or a new product or somebody creates something that has value that people want to consume. I've been teasing for a long time that I've been working on something incredible that it's becoming a lot cooler as the days go on. And probably in a couple of weeks, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. But it's something new. It's something different. It's something that doesn't exist in the Wyoming market yet. And so the whole idea is that it creates more interest. Well, that is exactly how the marketplace works, is that when a new product or new service comes around that people want to buy, then they buy it. And that generates new revenue. That's new business. That's business development. But it is impossible for government to do that. And a lot of times they just slit their own throats and give giant tax breaks, like $25 million for a nuclear reactor. And maybe that's a perfect example. But anyway, it's not generating any new revenue. It's not generating any new business. And it is impossible for government to create economic development. But that doesn't mean that we don't try, that our politicians don't try. Next Monday, we're going to do an interview with the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. That's right. Yeah, he's going to be in studio, and we're going to talk to him. Now, the reason why I'm so excited about that is that from the entire existence of the Wyoming Business Council, we've dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into that organization. The state of Wyoming has. In that whole time, the GDP of Wyoming has gone down. Yeah. Their chief job is to increase the GDP of Wyoming, but in their entire existence, it's gone down. And so we're going to have a discussion as to whether or not the Wyoming Business Council needs to exist. I mean, I think it's a really healthy debate because there's a lot of people that think that it's the government's job to help generate business. It's not. It's not at all. The government's job is to create an environment in which business can prosper. That is, to keep taxes low, to keep regulations at a minimum, and just leave businesses alone. Let them grow, let them operate, let the free marketplace take over. And because the market works, my friends, since Adam Smith wrote down and talked about the invisible hand of the market, it has worked. Capitalism works, my friends. The only time that it doesn't work is when government gets involved and screws the whole thing up, which is what all of this business development crap does. Now, there was a time where Wyoming communities were creating all these business parks. Like every town had to have a business park, and it was going to be great. And all of these factories and businesses that were going to move there, and it was going to jack up the economic output of all Wyoming communities. It was a fantastic idea. The problem is that it didn't really work. Not very many of them actually have businesses on them. And in fact, to my knowledge, the only one that has really worked as designed is the business park here in Sheridan. There are a number of Weatherby is up there. There's a couple of car dealerships. There's a factory or two. But pretty much that's the only one that I'm aware of. Maybe, I mean, when I talked to Josh Durrell, the head of the business council, we're going to talk about that. But most of these business parks that were created, there wasn't a business that moved in. And the classic example is 30 miles south of Sheridan in Buffalo. They spent like $20 million creating this business park, and it's pretty nice. It's got a nice curvy road all the way through it, and they spent a lot of money on infrastructure. And actually, they put the water line in twice because the first one didn't have the capacity for a big factory, and so they had to put a new one in. But there's never been a business on it. And in fact, the only thing that business park has ever produced is a couple of bales of hay. That's it. $20 million down the drain, and a single business didn't work there. That's because the business environment in Buffalo isn't suitable for a big factory. There's not enough people that live there. There's not a workforce. There's not a market that could support that business. It's right by the interstate, which is a good thing. You have to have access to transportation. But other than that, there's really no benefit for a business going in there, which is a perfect example of why business development doesn't work. Now, we're getting down to the bottom of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I'm actually going to get into Senator Sherry's op-ed. So we'll do that in just a second. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. That's right, my friends. Each and every day we should be eternally thankful for the gifts and the blessings that we've been given, and I couldn't do any of this without him. None of this is mine. All of it is his. And I am eternally grateful. So before the break, we were talking about business development and how it is actually impossible for government to create business development. And I laid out a pretty common sense way, reasoning for it, that it's just not possible. And it's not the government's job either. When government gets involved in business, they pick winners and losers. And the problem with this is you may have an industry or a business that government has helped either with a tax break or with a favorable location or whatever. And then every other business in the same market has to compete with government. And it's absolutely wrong. It's not the government's job. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the government needs to create business development. That's just something that liberal politicians came up with to grease the palms of their buddies. That's all it is. It's not the government's job. We got to stop picking winners and losers, which is exactly what Senator Steinmetz is talking about. And let me just read you the first couple paragraphs of her op-ed. And I quote, economic development should strengthen communities, create lasting prosperity, and secure our future. But in Wyoming today, we must ask, are we truly building economic development, or are we creating our own crisis? Across the state, industrial-scale wind and solar projects, hydrogen hubs, massive data centers are expanding at a rapid pace. These ventures are often touted as progress, but their impacts on land, water, and community stability suggest something is far more troubling. Private property rights are the cornerstone of American liberty, but they are not absolute. The harms principle, articulated by John Stuart Mill. Good job, Senator Sherry. Thank you for listening. I'm so proud of you. Anyway, the harms principle, articulated by John Stuart Mill in 1859 and echoed by in Thomas Jefferson's notes. I mean, Jefferson lived a long time before John Stuart Mill, but yeah, he said pretty much the same thing. But it holds that liberty ends where it causes harm to others. In other words, your rights end where mine begin. That you can do whatever you want so long as you don't infringe on the rights of others. Continuing now. When private property use escalates into industrial operations that impose costs on neighbors and communities, it ceases to be a matter of private property rights alone and becomes a matter of public policy. When a family installs a rooftop solar panel system or a small wind turbine to offset ranch power costs, that's a private use of property. We have the same thing at our cabin. It works beautifully. It has little to no impact on neighbors, the broader grid, or surrounding land. But when wind or solar expands into sprawling industrial and commercial facilities regulated under state and federal siting laws, tied to federal subsidies and designed to export power to across state lines, those projects cease to be merely private property. They become matters of public policy. Now, this is not about denying individuals the right to generate their own power. It's about recognizing the point at which where private use ends and public consequences begin. At that threshold, the public not only has a right, but a responsibility to weigh in. And a perfect example of this, my friends, is the meeting that Agent 29 is at right now. Well, in about 30 minutes anyway. It's the power company here in Sheridan wants to put in this giant transmission line. And of course, it's got to cross private property. Well, there's some property owners that are not too keen on their plan because it's going to pretty much trash the property value. And so there's an informational meeting that Agent 29 went to just, he's a representative. He should go anyway. But to just kind of get the tenor of what's going on, man, because while companies have a right to exist, they don't have a right to destroy private property. Now, again, we got to find a balance in there. That's why we have some laws about condemning property, when you make a fair and reasonable offer. But still, private property rights exist. Now, what Senator Sherry is talking about is actually the reverse. When a private property owner decides to do something on their property that affects everybody else. And I would argue that putting up a giant windmill, one of the big, I don't even know how tall they are, a couple 100-foot windmill, kind of affects everybody else's property and therefore their rights. And that's where the harms principle takes over, that while you have a right to do whatever you want with your property, you don't have a right to invade everybody else's. But the senator continues, quote, "The scale of land use is staggering. On average, wind requires 70,000 acres per gigawatt of electricity, while solar consumes between 3,500 and 10,000 acres per gigawatt. To put that into perspective, A single gigawatt of wind can take up around 110 square miles, nearly the land area of Denver, which spans 154 square miles. By contrast, a coal or natural gas plant producing the same gigawatt of power typically requires less than 640 acres, or about 1 square mile. These projects are not built on isolated wasteland. They often take over productive farm and ranch land, permanently removing it from agricultural use. They alter wildlife habitat and reshape communities and lower the value of neighboring properties. Water use is an equally pressing concern. Hydrogen hubs and data centers. And this is and by the way, I've got a guest that I'm trying to square up an interview with. He works for the Blaze, and he's got an interesting article about these data centers, but I'm trying to get that set up. Anyway, back to the piece. Including AI-driven computing facilities consume extraordinary amounts of water to operate. In an arid state like Wyoming, diverting scarce water away from irrigation and municipal needs to sustain speculative industries risks destabilizing the very foundation of rural life. And I couldn't agree more that if you ever get the opportunity, you should go check out the one of these windmills. Not look at it from the highway. I'm saying like walk up to the site where it's, you look straight up and there's the windmill. What it looks like on the ground is that somebody has changed their oil at the base of that windmill for the last 30 years. It's because these windmills, they are the last thing farthest from green energy that they could possibly get, because there's a giant motor on top of that windmill, and motors require grease and oil to operate, and the footprint of those things is gigantic. And it, they got to pour a huge concrete base, and it's the furthest thing from green energy. It's that's the narrative that people use around. Wow, it's green energy. It's renewable energy. The wind continues to blow, which is true, but it just doesn't blow all the time, and it doesn't always blow at optimum speeds, which is why you drive by windmills and they're not moving. It's because they can't handle 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts like we often get in Wyoming. Now, the senator says that some argue that any new source of power enhances national security, but reliability matters more than raw megawatts. Weather-dependent generation displaces steady baseload power, creating strain on the grid. When paired with round-the-clock demands of data centers and industrial projects, the strain grows. A fragile grid is not secure. Yet the larger issue isn't only about electrons. It's about what kind of Wyoming we're leaving to our children. And this is where, I think that this is more of a relative position. But I think that a lot of people agree with this. We don't want to trash the state, or trash an entire, agricultural operation and leave that to our kids. Though I would argue that we should be focusing on conservation. Now, here's what I don't mean this stupid idea of locking up big tracts of land, large tracts of land, with in conservation easements. That's not what I'm talking about. Wyoming has a very long history of steady conservation. Here's what I mean by that. You use the resources that you have in a responsible way that sustains them. You do it for example, it's okay to punch an oil well just so long as you're doing it correctly and safely and you're not trashing the environment. It's okay to open up a coal mine and dig the coal so long as you reclaim it when you're done. There's a congressional program, or at least there used to be, where they send staffers to Gillette, Wyoming. And they take the staffers on a tour of all these, coal operations. And one part of it that I've always found fascinating is they go out to, where there's, new virgin ground and land that has already been reclaimed. And they ask these staffers, okay, so which one of these have we already reclaimed? Which one? Or which one has yet to be mined? And every single time they point to the area that's already been reclaimed. If you look at any gas site, and you can drive anywhere in the Powder River Basin and you can find this out, you'll find, and I used to have a photo album. I don't know where it's at. It probably got lost in one move or another, but it was pictures of wildlife camping out on well pads There's sage grouse sitting on a wellhead, antelope eating the fresh green grass that's around the wellhead site. And it just on and on and on. And I would use it every time I went to a BLM meeting where I was trying to permit a project for a client. And, when the biologist would start up, I would just pull out the photo album and say, okay, well, if what you say is true, and I'm not saying it's not, but if what you say is true, explain this. And I'd show them all the pictures of all of the terrible impacts of the land and how the little creatures and critters can't accommodate themselves to it. They can't change their behavior with the environment. The truth is that all animals adapt. They do. And it's not these stupid migration corridors. God, that stuff irritates the crap out of me because it's entirely contrived. Now, it's true, animals will migrate along the most convenient path, but when that path is no longer available, they'll move. And it's not that big a deal. So the question is, how has Wyoming become such an expert in what is actually real conservation? Not the kind that the radical environmentalists use that word for, but how did we become an expert at doing this? Well, we realized that we have finite resources and that we have to manage those resources so that they will continue. A big chunk, not the majority, but a big chunk of Wyoming's economy is outdoor recreation, hunting and fishing and those sorts of things. Well, to have an animal population that is sustainable, you have to manage it. That is, you have to only issue so many licenses that the population of animals can support. And so the Wyoming Game and Fish, by the way, if you didn't know, the Wyoming Game and Fish is probably the premier wildlife management agency in the entire United States. They do, even though they're heavily overfunded and there's some bureaucratic problems there. The biologists on the ground do a really good job. And the truth is that in any population, when it gets too big, nature, God, has a way of managing that population, and it's done so with disease. Every single population of animals, it doesn't matter which one, when the population gets too big, a disease breaks out. For example, in ungulates, so that's, elk, deer, antelope, there's chronic wasting disease. With fish and other animals too, it's not just fish, but mostly with fish, there's whirling disease. And that was a really weird one. It caused fish to swim in a circle. With rabbits, it's tularemia, and on and on and on. So you have to manage the population through hunting and fishing, and that's how we create conservation. It is responsible use of the resources that you're given so that they can be used in the future. That's very different than the wind and solar and nuclear operations that a lot of people are in favor of, because that destroys the land in perpetuity, forever, meaning it's not going to come back. And so, I would argue that that's not a responsible use of it. And so while it may sound that I'm opposed to all these things, I'm not. I'm not at all. In fact, I'm in favor of just about any type of energy, if the technology exists that it's of benefit to us. I don't think that any of these industries need to exist on federal subsidies. The nuclear site that they're building in Kemmerer, it's 50% of that thing is supported by federal government subsidies. The Radiant plant in Casper, or that they're trying to put in Casper, pretty much everything they're going to produce is going to the Defense Department. Okay, it is heavily subsidized, and I've got to find this on paper somewhere, but there's $25 million that's going to go to these folks to build this thing. It is subsidized. That's picking winners and losers. That's the government trying to get involved. The government needs to stay the heck out of business. If there is a need in the market for any of these industries, it doesn't really matter what it is. That need will create a product, and therefore the market will adapt to it. But if that need is not needed, if that product is not needed and is therefore supported by subsidies, well, that's the only way that it can exist. And the perfect example of this is windmills. Those things are not profitable without government subsidies, period. End of sentence. And so when those subsidies go away, there's no more profit to them, and thus there's no reason to put them up. And, you know, we've got to get past this whole idea that government needs to be involved in everything, because when it is, you endanger the rights of individual citizens, you know, in the name of, and it's always moving forward, progress, you know, it's helping the state. It's all of these big esoteric terms that really don't mean anything. And in the end, it ends up violating the rights of individual citizens. It's wrong. We shouldn't do it. You know, let's just talk about nuclear energy for a minute. It is an abundant form of energy. Probably it's way more efficient than, digging a coal mine or punching an oil well or whatever. But the problem is that it's got this real nasty byproduct waste that is highly radioactive and will continue to be radioactive for thousands of years. While I'm in favor of nuclear power, I'm not in favor of nuclear waste. I think that's a stupid idea. And I think anybody that proposes that we create a nuclear waste dump in this state is also stupid. Either that or they're just entirely driven with money. And I think that's what a lot of this boils down to. You're seeing dollar signs and you're thinking, wow, this is going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. Think about the jobs. It's the jobs. And that's what politicians always say. You know, think about how many jobs we can create. Well, and while that's probably true, what are you going to be doing to the land? What exactly is going to happen to that nuclear waste dump in 50 years when all of us right now most of us that are listening to this program are dead and gone? What is going to happen to the land? Is that nuclear waste dump still going to be there? Is it going to be reclaimed? Is there going to be technology that exists that can, take care of that nuclear waste? I think probably so, sometime in the near future. And if that were possible right now, and I don't mean 10 years from now or 20 years from now or 30 years from now, I mean right now, if that technology existed right now, I would be in favor of it, because there's no giant threat of a nuclear waste dump. And I don't buy the argument. I don't buy the argument at all that, well, we've got these casks, you see, and they're entirely secure, and we've hit one with a train and it didn't open. Well, okay, fine. That's great. Fantastic. I've watched videos of like that before, but what happens when that cask is bombarded with radiation for, say, 40 years, which is the lifespan of these things? Can you still hit it with the train? Is it still going to withstand that? I've got concrete and it's probably some in our driveway right now that, it's been there for over 10 years. And, there's only two types of concrete, my friend. There's concrete that is cracked, and there is concrete that is going to crack. It is the second law of thermodynamics, my friends. That is a fancy physics way of saying that everything degrades. Everything. It's called entropy. Given enough time, everything will degrade into nothingness. That matter always degrades. And so for any of these folks, in bar none, on their city council, online, on the endless things on social media, if you're not taking that into account, frankly, you haven't thought the whole thing through. And, it's, I was driving around the other day and I was thinking, man, am I against all of this, energy development? And it seems like I was, but what I'm really, and I do this a lot, I try to engage in self-introspection to question my own beliefs. And so when I do my program, I can talk about them in a coherent way. I'm in favor of conservation. I'm in favor of doing things responsibly in the right way. I'm not in favor of picking winners and losers. In fact, I am absolutely against the government being involved in the free market. I don't think there's any place for it. And if you're saying that this industry has to have government subsidies to exist, well, then maybe that industry doesn't need to exist at all. It's the 2008 financial crisis. It's TARP. It's George W. Bush. I had to break the free market to save the free market. All of that is bullcrap, my friends. Just focus on the free market. And when you do that, everything is going to operate just fine. So anyway, Senator Sherry, if you're listening, you need to come on the program so we can talk about this op-ed. I really like it. And if you, I'll go ahead and put it out on my social media after the program, and so that you can read it for yourself. I think she did a really good job of it, and I think that she hits the nail on the head, that everything in government needs to boil down to a question of rights, that, is whatever you're doing going to invade personal property rights, or are we just doing something to, damage an individual's right, because that's the only reason that government should exist is to protect individual liberty. That's the only reason that government exists. And when you are straying outside of that one harms principle, you're not doing what the purpose of government is to do. So hold on just a second. I needed a slug of coffee. That was a long monologue. That's one of the reasons why I really do enjoy being back in the home studio is my coffee pot, which is right there. Incredible. Now, I'm sure you've heard that Chicago has a wee little problem with guns, and that, it's for years since the Democrats, they pretty much controlled Chicago forever. So they've always had a problem with guns. And so Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, he has a new idea as to why there are so many guns in Chicago. And there's only one reason he can come up with that maybe those guns exist. And it's not because, it's not because maybe they're from Chicago. Here's what he says. This is from Breitbart News. And it's entitled, "This is what Brandon Johnson is blaming for Chicago's violent labor weekend." And actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and play this video for you from the very beginning, and then we'll tell you what the truth is. Let's see here. Local video, and let me go find Brandon Johnson. And, this guy is just eternally irritating. It's just, I don't really understand why people vote for the idiots that they do. But here's Brandon Johnson explaining what the real problem with all of the crime in Chicago is. Here you go. Here's Brandon Johnson.
However, we will never be able to end gun violence in Chicago as long as the president continues to allow tens of thousands of guns to be trafficked into our state and our city. The vast majority of guns do not come from Chicago. They are not made in Cook County. They are not bought in the state of Illinois. These guns come from red states. They are coming from Indiana. They are coming from Mississippi. They are coming from Louisiana. And that is the harsh reality, whether Republicans like it or not.
Yeah, whether Republicans like it or not.
Will do nothing to solve this problem.
Okay, so whether Republicans like it or not, the source of all of these guns is not Chicago. It's not coming from Illinois. It's coming from somewhere else, except, of course, that according to the Block Club in Chicago, it's a website you ought to go check out, Illinois gun shops lead in providing guns used in the state and city crimes. The data shows it. And I quote, "More than 1/3 of Illinois guns used in crimes recovered by authorities are linked to," you guessed it,
Chicago, Chicago, that toddling
That's
town.
right, my friends. They're actually linked to Chicago. And I quote, "And Illinois gun shops were the leading single source of those crime guns state and citywide. Not out-of-state vendors, according to Brandon Johnson, but according to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Most of those guns come from Chicago. Chicago police recovered more than 10,000 guns last year. Now, not all were traced, according to the police department. But when law enforcement takes a gun tied to a crime, they may ask the Federal Bureau's Tracing Center to track down the gun's original manufacturer, seller, and buyer. The statewide tracking data shows information where the guns originated, what types of guns are being recovered, and how long it takes for a gun to be used in a crime after it's bought. More than 8,600 of the nearly 20,000 guns recovered statewide last year were used in crimes committed in the city, according to the federal statistics. Only 15,306 of those guns recovered statewide were successfully traced. So they collected 20,000 guns. They were only able to trace 15,000 of them. But that means guns bought in from out of state are still involved in a huge portion of the crimes committed in Chicago. So we're not saying all the guns. It's just the majority of them. Quote, "If you could eliminate 50% of the guns, imagine how much safer this would be," Duncan said. The problem is Chicago's not an island, and guns pour into the city from other places, just like in every other state. But the truth is, it is not the gun's fault. It is the people behind the gun, holding it, pulling the trigger, are the reason why you have crime. And if you're not going to prosecute those people, then you're not going to get a handle on crime. But let's just talk about, his deflection, his projection to red states. Well, you see, the problem is red states. It's too easy to buy a gun there, and then they come to Chicago and they kill our citizens. Well, if Chicago actually prosecuted criminals and actually had a DA that would prosecute crime as it is supposed to be, then maybe they would get a handle on crime. But the problem is that Democrats have run that and other cities. Baltimore is another one. Washington, D.C. is another one. Though Washington, D.C. is a little bit different. It's under federal control. But it is not a question of guns. And if his proposition holds true, that is, that guns are the problem, then Wyoming should be overrun with guns. In Wyoming, guns outnumber the population more than 10 to 1. Now, I used to have a large collection of guns before they were lost in a tragic boating accident. But just about every Wyoming citizen has at least a couple of guns floating around their house. Hopefully they're not floating. But anyway, and if Brandon Johnson is correct, then Wyoming, Colorado has a lot of gun control laws now, but Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, Idaho, probably Utah, should be overrun with crime. I mean, there should be no stopping it. There should be nowhere anybody could hide from crime. But the truth is that it is not the guns that commit crime. There's the gun that I wear. I could set it on this table right now. And if it sat there and nobody touched it for 10,000 years, that gun is not going to kill anybody. People kill people. Guns don't kill people. And until Brandon Johnson or any of these idiot Democrats figure that out, there's not going to be any resolution to crime. And that brings up another point, that Democrats really aren't interested in lowering crime. Because if they were, they would hire more police officers. They would enact laws that actually prevent crime instead of gun control laws. The truth is, the only way that you stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And every police officer that I've ever met will tell you that. And that brings up another point. Why do we arm police officers? If guns are the problem, why do cops traipse around with a gun attached to their hip? I mean, it looks like a walking crime wave to me. Well, the truth is, my friends, that the constituency that has the lowest crime rate and even lower than police are those folks who have a concealed weapons permit. And this is just a Democrat lie, and it has been for the longest time. And it all boils down to control. Now, if you think that that it's anything other than that, you are sorely mistaken, my friends. Because if you don't have a gun, then you can be controlled. And that was, and during and after the Revolutionary War, a lot of colonies before the Revolutionary War and states after had laws where you were required by law to own guns and enough ammunition to supply them. And I don't know how we got, and we even, as late as the 1970s and perhaps the 1980s, schools had, as part of their physical education curriculum, shooting lessons. Now, when I was in school, we didn't have guns. I guess that was far too late. I graduated in 1997, but we had archery. Okay, that was fun. But, in the early 1980s and definitely through the 50s, 60s, 70s, you had shooting classes in schools, sometimes inside of a school. Some schools had shooting ranges built into the school. Several years ago, when I started Cowboy State Politics, I did an episode, and I think it was called "The Tyranny of Joe Biden." It was all about guns, but there was a long segment in there where I was discussing how some schools actually had shooting ranges in the school. So, my friends, all of this bullcrap, and you know it, coming out of liberal Democrat-run places, it's all about control, trying to take your ability to defend yourself. And actually, Great Britain, the UK, is a perfect example of what happens when you ban guns. Crime actually goes up. Other types of crime go up. Knife and rock crime goes up. So anyway, it's just Brandon Johnson being an idiot and just trying to convince his people of things that don't exist, which is why his approval rating is so in the toilet. Last I looked, it was at 12% or something. But anyway, my friends, just another Democrat who doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Well, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I've got a funny story. David Mamet sat down with Bill Maher, and Bill didn't really like what Mamet had to say. But I'll tell you about it in just a second. And we'll talk about the so-called affordable housing in Jackson. Not so affordable anymore.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap, and your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you non-stop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. Number 31 on the list of the 100 podcasts you should be listening to in 2025. Thank you for watching the program. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Excuse me. Without you, I couldn't do what I'm doing. By the way, if you hear that sound in the background, that's the coffee pot that I mentioned earlier. And I know it's got kind of a weird sound to it. But anyway, welcome back to the show, my friends. So there's so-called affordable housing. We've heard this term all over the place, probably in every Wyoming community. And the truth is that there really is a lack of affordable housing. But, you know, it's not the fault of the government. It's just the free market, right? You know, if I owned an extra house and I could get $1,200 a month out of it, I'm going to do that instead of just, charging $500 for it. But you got to let the free market operate. And one of the reasons why you have a lack of affordable housing is that government is involved. And this, I guess the theme of this whole show is just allow the free market to operate. Because when government gets involved, you pick winners and losers. And there's a reason why. And we don't really have a lot of these in Wyoming, but when I lived in Tennessee, I lived pretty close to a housing project, and it was it was a hole. You could tell they used to be pretty nice buildings, but when people don't have to work for what they have, when they're given something for nothing, they don't respect it. And it is an absolute fact when you put up public tenements or housing projects or whatever one wants to call it, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think the people in Jackson would probably be aghast if we referred to their affordable housing as a tenement or a housing project. But that's really what it is. They are always dilapidated. And while they may look pretty nice and shiny new when they start, well, they don't really get taken care of because, again, when you are given something for nothing or at a reduced rate, then the folks that are living there don't respect it. And it's a proven fact that price controls don't work. And I'm going to get to that piece in the Jackson Hole News and Guide here in just a second. But there is an article in the Free Press talking about rent control and how it is and always has been an idiotic idea. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Free Press, you really should. It's it's a pretty new outlet, but I really enjoy a lot of the articles on it. And here's another one. Okay, this is written by a guy named Judge Glock, not an actual judge. That's his first name. But it's entitled, Is there a dumber housing policy than rent control? The answer to that question is no. That's the dumbest thing that anybody's ever said. But anyway, here we go. And I quote, economists working on rent control are forced to adopt an attitude of weary resignation. The studies on it are so universally negative, the lamentable results so consistent that reiterating them can feel both necessary and really tiresome. Yet, rent control endures, and there's a reason for that, and he goes on to explain it here. But the presidential campaigns of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both advocated for it, and now Zoran Mamdani and people in Jackson and across Wyoming, by the way, have made freezing rents a centerpiece of their New York City mayoral campaign. Rent control remains a great rejoinder to all those who cherish the belief that evidence and experience can sway policy. The question is why rent control remains so popular despite its profoundly negative effects. The reason lies in the strange aspects of housing that make it different from every other good in America. Now, some argue that low prices are always popular, but even radical politicians in America don't advocate for price controls on sofas or cars or stereos or podcasting equipment for that matter. Mamdani bemoaned high food prices in addition to high rents, but he did not propose price limits on grocery store cartels. Politicians treat housing differently. Now, one reason that rent control seems attractive to politicians is that housing is a big and it is immovable and immobile. If price controls were imposed on, say, a pita black market can open up, or pita manufacturers can ship their wares elsewhere. It's not easy. It's not very easy at all to hide a house or to ship it or to move it to another location or to, change it to another appealing business climate. But rental housing is less immobile than many rent control advocates think. For one, the owner of the house or the apartment doesn't have to rent it out. During World War II, the American home ownership rate rose a shocking 10 percentage points, accounting for about half of the increase in home ownership in the entire 20th century. According to one research paper, a major explanation of that shift is that rent control during the war forced landlords to transfer their units to buyers. Similarly, when San Francisco expanded rent control to some small houses and multifamily units in 1994, researchers found a 25-point reduction in renters living in them. Time and again, the reduction in the number of apartments made rents in the non-regulated units go up. Another reason that rent control seems attractive is that unlike bread and many other consumer goods, housing is long-lasting. When governments impose rent controls, the buildings themselves will remain in place for years, and most renters don't have to go back to builders to buy more. Now, some argue that low prices are always popular, but even radical politicians in America don't advocate for price controls on other goods that are movable, like a couch or the previously mentioned podcasting equipment. Yet one of the most consistent findings in all of the literature is that buildings under rent control stop getting maintained and fall into decay. And there's a big reason for that, because they are subsidized. If you don't have to maintain your building, if you don't have to continue to make it attractive in order to rent it, why would you spend money improving it? You wouldn't, because you no matter what you do, you're still going to get money for it. And just think about it, right? If you have a unit that in the market it could rent for, say, I don't know, $1,000 a month, and 500 of that is subsidized by government, and the other 500 comes from your renters. Well, okay, so your renters can't find another place that's as low a price as your rent-controlled housing project, like the one that's in Jackson. And the other $500 you get for the rent is subsidized, and so that's guaranteed. And so pretty much is the rent money that is guaranteed from the person living there. So why on earth would you improve your building, right? You're not going to get any more money for it. Your renters aren't going to go anywhere because they can't find another place to live for that price. And the subsidy is going to continue into perpetuity. So there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that you're going to improve it. Rather, you're not. You're just going to collect your paycheck and go on. And then your building continues to decay because there's no reason to improve on it, which is why just about every housing project that you've ever seen slips into disrepair and decay because there's no reason for it. I mean, there's no reason to maintain it. It is the exact same thing that I've been talking about this entire episode. That the problem with government getting involved is you pick winners and losers. Now let's shift over to a guy that's got a really nice apartment complex, right? He spent his money, built it, and they're pretty nice outfits in some places in Wyoming. Well, even in Sheridan, in Buffalo too. There's really not that many places to rent or buy, and so you can pretty much charge whatever you want. And I think the going rate here in Sheridan for an apartment is like $1,700 a month, which I think is outrageous. But that's what the going rate is because there aren't any other places. Now, if there were other buildings, other apartment buildings, other housing that was put up, and every once in a while you see a new housing development being proposed. Well, there's competition. Competition breeds excellence. And so if you're the guy that has a rental unit and you have to compete in the free market with other people that have rental units, you want to make yours more attractive. You see the same thing with Airbnbs. And while those are short-term rentals, I think the same principle applies. If you talk to anybody that owns an Airbnb, they'll tell you that the reviews are extraordinarily important. That they try, so owners of an Airbnb try so hard not to get a negative review. And if you walk in, every Airbnb that I've ever rented has been, you walk in and it's clean and there's really nice stuff in there and it's a welcoming environment. That's to make it more attractive so that you can rent it more, so that you can charge more for it, so that you make more money, so that it succeeds in a marketplace that's loaded with a whole bunch of other Airbnbs. Cheyenne's a perfect example of that. During the session, it's really hard to find a place to rent. And so the folks that do have an Airbnb, well, they want you to rent it. And so they make it as attractive as possible. And, you walk in and it's clean and there's nice furniture and, there's amenities and they've got the landlord's phone number plastered everywhere in case there's the little tiniest of problem. They can be right there to fix it. So if you have to operate in the free market, well, of course, you're going to make it the most attractive product that you can, and so that you can make the most money. That principle does not apply to affordable housing because it is government subsidized. Now let's go to that article in the Jackson Hole News and Guide, and I love this. My friends, it turns out that we're not really all that interested in in affordable housing at all. Let me just find the article here. I've got to get my printer fixed so that I can actually have a stack of stuff. I print, and I think I've told you about this, but when I'm doing show prep, I try to start the night before, though I'm not all that successful at it. But I just find an article and I send it to the printer, and then when I'm ready, I go to the printer and just grab all the articles. I'm a big fan of doing everything on paper, and so that's why a lot of times on the program you'll see a stack of paper here. It's just, I'm old school. I like things on paper. That way I can shuffle them around and they make noise. But I haven't got print cartridges for the printer yet, so we're having to do everything on the electric computer. So here we go from the Jackson Hole News and Guide. I love this story. This is incredible. Developer of a $250 million Teton Village condo flops on promised affordable housing. Now, why would he do that? It couldn't be that maybe he got a big giant subsidy for doing that, and then he realized that he would make more money if he didn't have affordable housing. I don't know. It's just a wild-eyed guess. But here's what the piece says. Quote, while constructing a $250 million luxury condo complex in Teton Village, developers built less than half of the affordable units they'd promised. I wonder why that is. Rob Disselorius, I guess that's Disseloriers, whatever his name is, development team originally said that it would build 28 affordable units to offset housing demands created by the Hoback Club development in Teton Village. At the time, that number exceeded the county's 22-unit requirement, according to a 2020 staff report. But after the Teton County Board of Commissioners approved the preliminary plan for the development, a divided commission and Jackson Town Council slashed the, here it is, housing mitigation rates required for commercial projects in 2020, fearing state lawmakers might axe the program altogether. That was Senate File 40, which they should absolutely take that up, and I have no doubt that there will be a bill in the upcoming session to do just that. But developers behind the Hoback Club's $250 million luxury condo project built 15 fewer affordable dwellings to offset their development's impact than promised when seeking county approval in 2020. So let me just break this down for you. Before he started building the project, when he had to get approval, he told the people, the big wigs in Jackson, the county commissioners, and the town council that, I'll build 28 affordable housing units, which I would love to know what the rent is on an affordable housing unit in Jackson. But anyway, so he tells all the bigwigs, I'm going to build 28 affordable housing units. Okay, fantastic. You're offsetting it, and everybody feels good about it. Well, when it's all approved, when everything's good, and he probably got a subsidy to do that, then he says, maybe if I built fewer, I could make more money. You see, the problem, my friends, with socialism is socialism. The problem with capitalism is capitalist. Now, Rush Limbaugh explained this perfectly on his program, and I've got a soundbite that I'm going to play for you. Now, he starts out talking about illegal immigration, but just stick with it because then he talks about the problems with socialism. Here is Rush Limbaugh.
These illegals are being exploited and used by the Democrat Party, in some cases their own governments, by sending them here. And the American left in general, which has a big chip on its shoulder about this country anyway and would love nothing more than for all of it to be torn down. The problem with socialism is socialism. The problem with capitalism is capitalists. Now, before you think this is a criticism of capitalism, it's not. The problem with socialism is itself. There's nothing wrong with capitalism, except there are some people who game the system. But in socialism, why has socialism never worked? Because the people who run it are not socialists. They are full-fledged capitalists. Go to the Soviet Union, go to China, go to Cuba. The sons and daughters of party members do what? They live in the nicest houses. They have the nicest cars. They go to the nicest schools. The people in power in socialist societies have the power to game the system for themselves. In capitalism, you do it through your work. You do it through your education. You do it by accessing opportunity in the private sector. Socialism has the same kind of people who don't want to be equal with everybody else, where, socialism exists on this premise that we're all the same and we're all equal, and we're going to take from those who have and redistribute to those who don't, so that everybody's going to have the same. But it never works out. And why not? Because there's always a ruling class that has everything they want, forcing mediocrity, averageness on everybody else. And those people left are still trying to game the system to get out of their squalid circumstances. So it never works. It never can work, because socialism is in direct violation of human nature. Capitalism is not. Capitalism embodies human nature, from freedom to ambition on down the line. Nobody has ever said unfettered capitalism. Nobody has ever said we need an unregulated market. The difference is, you need a referee, as in the government. But when the referee starts playing the game, then we're all cooked. And the referee is now playing the game. The referee is owning car companies. The referee is owning the banking business, trying to take it over.
Okay, all right, so there you go. The problem with socialism is itself, and that is the problem in Jackson. That the town council, which, by the way, they're not socialists, they are capitalists, but they want the same for everybody else, except that they are going to live in the nicest houses and they're going to drive the nicest cars. But you poor people that live in Jackson and you serve our food and you tend our gardens and you shovel the snow on all of our dumb walking paths, well, then you get to live in so-called affordable housing. But the problem here is that the folks at the top are not socialists. The guy that built that housing development, he is not a socialist. He is a full-fledged capitalist. And and he's the guy that is going to game the system and break the rules. He already did, man. He agreed to 28 units and he built 15. Of course he did. Oh, I mean, why wouldn't he? Because he can make more money. These people on the town council in Jackson, they're just dumb because they don't understand that their socialism never works. It never has. It never will. And, and they should know, because they're the very people that aren't socialists. They just want everybody else to engage in it so that they can stroke their, their socialist tendencies. This article goes on. Listen to this. Quote, "The Hobart Club retroactively took advantage of the reduced mitigation rates to build fewer affordable units." Of course they did. Why wouldn't they? All right. And received the county staff's permission to do so, while county commissioners remained unaware of the shift. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Now, the result, the developer, DDRM Jackson Hole, which this guy represents, instead built 13 rent-restricted apartments and 15 free market apartments at 1120 South Park Loop Road. The 28-unit building, constructed by the developer to satisfy the mitigation requirements, and what are these housing mitigation fees? So in Jackson, if you're going to build anything, you have to pay the county extra money to build on the property that you've already agreed that you can build on. So it's a fee for you to make use of your own private property. It's absolutely unconstitutional. Quote, "I've been driving by that development assuming that there are 28 restricted units there. For a long time," board chair Mark Newcomb said at a meeting last week. "Indeed, there are not. I can't be happy about that," he asked. But you should have been, you're the dummy that approved it. You're a socialist and you should know. But just because of who you are, that was not going to be the result. The affordable unit flare-up comes as Cody Lane Development Corporation, owner of the Hobart Club, is embroiled in a legal battle with the general contractor it hired to build the enormously expensive luxury condo building in the shadow of Jackson Hole Mountain Resort's aerial tram. Newcomb pointed out the discrepancy between the promised and the built units at an August 19th meeting. He, along with the commissioner, Natalia Macker, and Luther Probst. Natalia Macker, she's the Democrat who is in charge of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And Luther Probst is the husband of Democrat Representative Liz Storer. They have different last names, but they're married. Served on the commission when it considered the Hobart Club's preliminary development plan 5 years ago. Last week, commissioners expressed frustration over the uncovered affordable unit deficit, but still voted unanimously to approve the Hobart Club's 5 rental deed restrictions under review. So wait a minute. So these are the people that set up this whole affordable housing debacle. They are the folks that administered the housing mitigation fees. They're the folks in charge, right? But they are also the people that, we'll go ahead and vote for it anyway. I mean, what could be more hypocritical It is a perfect example of the lunacy that goes on in the People's Republic of Jackson. Now, after a week's reflection, some commissioners regretted their choice. On Monday, Luther Probst called for a motion to reconsider the deed restriction approval. After half an hour of conversation, Probst's motion failed on a 3-2 vote. Why? Because the other commissioners are capitalists too. Because they don't want to reduce the amount of housing. They want this guy to build other luxury condos. So even the people that create the rules that say that you have to live and pay into their socialism aren't the folks that want to enforce that socialism because they're capitalists. I mean, I don't know that there's a better example of the stupidity of socialism than right here. And you need to look no further. Now, there are other parts of Wyoming that aren't quite as insane as Jackson. And, every time I go to Jackson, I hear stories like this, and you can hardly believe them that that county actually exists in Wyoming. I've often said, and even one of my sponsors, Rebecca Bextel, which, by the way, if you're interested in buying any piece of property, call Rebecca. She's an expert at finding you the piece of property, legally without socialism in a completely capitalistic environment that is perfect for you. And if you've mistakenly moved to Jackson and realized that a bunch of socialists run that place and you actually want to move to Wyoming, across the county line, call Rebecca. She'll find you a house. But this is a perfect example of something that some harebrained scheme that is hatched in, a Democrat enclaves that gets exported to the rest of the state. Now, there's also, and I tried to find this article, but there's also an article talking about a Sheridan development, the Sheridan Community Land Trust. It's the exact same thing. It is subsidized housing. And again, it's picking winners and losers. And if you want to create a housing development that's absolutely going to crumble and turn into a pile of crap, then get the government involved, because that's exactly what's going to happen. We're a little bit short of our third break, but let's go ahead and take it anyway. And when we come back, we'll finish up the program. My friends, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, I can write a book, but nobody would read it because it's so unbelievable. Back in a minute, my friends.
What everybody say?
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listened to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day.
boy, state politics is only going to continue to expand. This program is growing faster than, faster than I ever thought it would. I checked the views on yesterday's podcast, which, by the way, watching, and I think I started out the program with this, but watching the response to that, it has been incredible. Now, this program, your illustrious host, I'm not a reliable source of information, and really, they gave out extra benefits to their teachers, and that's where all the money went. Yeah, bullcrap. The law that was passed says raises. That's what it says, and that's what I just cannot. It boggles my mind how twisted up these liberals will get in an effort to deflect from the truth. And it's, I just got a message, during the break. It's, they're saying that you're not a reliable source. And it's really this report is a nothing burger. Yeah. It's absolutely, I can't tell you how much fun I have just watching the response to some of the stories that I break. And yesterday was a big one. Well, anyway, I realized during the break that I didn't play that Bill Maher soundbite for you. And it was David Mamet. If I'm sure you've watched some of his movies. One of them was Wag the Dog. But he's a playwright, and he was sitting down with Bill Maher, and they were talking about the family. Here is that soundbite. I think this is great.
I know you think liberals want to destroy the family.
Liberals want no, I don't think they want to destroy the family. I think they have destroyed the family.
Oh, that's okay.
But they haven't destroyed my family.
But they didn't really do it on purpose. That's the
wait a second. What you're saying is, I didn't know it was loaded, right?
Yes.
That's what Lee Harvey Oswald could have said, right?
Okay, but they actually, liberals actually think they're doing good. I know a lot of times it's really just about making them feel good, which is what's so obnoxious when they do that. But they're not actually trying to.
Yes, but what we understand as dramatists is that nobody ever did something for a bad reason.
There you go. And so, the reason that I brought that up to you is liberals, socialists, they always hatch these schemes. And I really think that, there are some of them that are just evil socialists that are really capitalists, like Rush said. But I really think that they have the best of intentions, right? You survey the landscape in Wyoming and you say, we really have a shortage of affordable housing. But instead of creating the economic conditions by which a private developer would put up, apartments that he could rent for a reasonable fee, instead of creating the conditions by which a company might move to your town and build, an apartment. But by the way, there's a perfect example of that happening in Du Bois, Wyoming right now. Dan Stark, the guy that owns the military museum over there, he saw a need for a hotel. So what did he do? He's building one. That's how the free market should operate, my friends, that if there is a need, the free market will provide. But the reason why we have a lot of, that we do have a shortage of affordable housing is because government gets in there and mucks everything up, that there's all of this government intervention. And so there's no reason for anybody to build affordable housing because the government is just going to get in there and monkey with everything anyway. And my friends, this happens every single time. You would think that after a while, we would figure out that these harebrained schemes don't work. But, in socialism, never works. And so anytime that you look at anything and you get even the slightest aroma or putrid smell of socialism, you already know from the very beginning that it's not going to work. That the only job that the government has is to do those things that are required of it, that are enumerated to it in the U.S. and Wyoming Constitution. And there's really not that many of them. Okay, provide infrastructure, water, sewer. You got to have roads. I like having nice, smooth roads to ride on. Police, you got to have a police force. They're kind of nice. I really don't like having to defend my own property, even though I do. By the way, if you approach my house, you obviously value my stuff more than you do your life. Just fair warning. I'm just telling you. It's not me that you have to worry about. It's the lovely Christine But I'll tell you about that here in just a second. But anytime you see anything that's got a whiff of socialism around it, you already know that it's not going to work, that eventually it's going to fail. And that needs to be the default vote for any of these proposals that come from the redcoats or the radical left in Wyoming. If you even smell socialism on it, if it's even affordable housing, or, we're going to take care of these people, you already know that it's not going to work, and you should just vote no on it. So over the Labor Day weekend, the lovely Christine and I went and did a little shooting. Quite a while ago, she bought a pistol, and we just haven't had an opportunity to go out and shoot it. And so we went and shot. And the pistol's crap. She doesn't like it at all, and we're going to sell it, just as soon as possible. But anyway, I handed her my Ruger Blackhawk 357, which I love that gun. It's got to be. I don't know if it's my favorite gun. I only have a couple of them now since that boating accident. But anyway, the lovely Christine is a deadeye with a pistol. It didn't matter what I handed her. It was, we've got these flop down targets at the cabin, and it was like ping, 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 5 out of 6 shots. I was sitting there going, wow, my wife's a killer. I mean, that's incredible shooting. I was really, really proud of her, and we had a really good time. But anyway, let's get back on task here. We've got just a little bit of the program to go through, and I've got a number of pieces. And I think, you know what, the one we're going to start with is old Shifty Adam Schiff. Now, and I'm just going to play for this, and it kind of speaks for itself. But I got all these videos put together in this morning while I was doing show prep. But they're talking about all the DC crime numbers. And I should have done this when I played you the Brandon Johnson video. But, their liberals are scrambling to try to figure out a way to explain the decrease in crime in Washington, D.C. Because, of course, it can't be all the federal troops. It can't be that if you actually prosecute criminals, that if you arrest them, then crime goes down. That's too logical for redcoats and Democrats, because that's Trump's plan, and we're against anything that Trump does. And here's another baffling thing that liberals do, that they are in favor of higher crime because it's Trump that is reducing crime in cities. And the mere suggestion that Trump will send the National Guard, and let me just dispel that whole troop thing in just a second, but the mere suggestion that he's going to send troops to Washington, D.C., well, they have to be against that. We can't be in favor of reducing crime. And now you've heard, and I've got, this Adam Schiff video, you're going to hear him say it, but there is this conflation of terms going on. There is military being conflated with National Guard. The National Guard are state troops. The military are federal troops. Now, it is true that the federal government is in charge of the National Guard. One of our very dear friends, Carmen, is over in Jordan right now. In a couple of weeks, she'll be back home. We're really excited to see her, and we're very proud of her for serving over there. But she was deployed overseas in a military capacity. But, really, it's governors that are in charge of the National Guard. And it's every once in a while the federal government or the military says, hey, your guys are getting shipped off to the boondocks. But they're state troops. So it's not the military that we're talking about here. But Democrats are trying to conflate those two terms, state, National Guard, federal, military, so that it makes an argument for them that we're violating posse comitatus, which is not the truth at all. But anyway, here's what old Shifty Adam Schiff had to say. Check this out.
All right, so Trump, he has referred to himself as the chief law enforcement officer of the country, right, as opposed to commander-in-chief, right, a nuance that matters. But he says, Senator, as you know, he says this is about combating crime, and he says it's working in Washington, D.C., where, of course, you are tonight. So when you look at the numbers there, though, this is according to Washington, D.C.'s official database last week. I know you're familiar with these numbers, but here they are. A 44% decrease in violent crime in the 3 weeks since the federal surge, right, compared to the same period a year ago. That includes a 44% drop in decrease. Homicides compared to the same time last year. So, I mean, if that is the outcome of what he's doing, is that something to actually celebrate?
Well, I don't think I can analyze what D.C.'s crime numbers were.
I
but
can't
say
really
this
look at that.
about Los Angeles and the deployment of troops there. First of all, it was completely unnecessary. We didn't need the National Guard, thousands of National Guard troops activated for this purpose, something that frankly takes them away from doing work, fighting fires, doing the work that our military is called upon to do as a military force, not as a civilian force. To deploy Marines to Los Angeles for that purpose was also another waste of military resources.
Oh, it's a waste of military resources. They can't do what the National Guard is supposed to do, which is fighting fires, which apparently they don't do in California either. But did you notice how he pivoted? No, I can't really analyze the dramatic reduction in crime. I really don't know numbers. Absolutely ridiculous. And then he says, "Well, we didn't need troops in California. It was absolutely unnecessary." Really? To stop the riots because you were doing such a bang-up job before the troops went in. I mean, it is, again, this is Adam Schiff, Adam Schiff, trying to misrepresent numbers and just not wanting to answer the question because, of course, even the Democrats know deep down that a reduction in crime is a good thing. But because it's Donald Trump, they're not going to be in favor of it. Now, we've got about 20 minutes. We've got plenty of time to do this. Our Representative Harriet Hageman went to, and this is a different subject entirely, went to the floor of the House to argue against all of these BLM RMPs. Now, just a quick refresher. If you remember, I think it was last year, Harriet Hageman was fighting against the Rock Springs RMP and the Buffalo RMP. Now, those two things they're very similar, got the same name. And really, they have the same result, sort of. But so the Rock Springs RMP would have locked up millions of acres or hundreds of thousands of acres of BLM land from human contact at all. Like no hiking, no bike riding, no four-wheelers, none of that crap, no hunting, no nothing. It was, this is so pristine and, we just have to lock it up for future generations. Well, the problem is, in Wyoming, we have, a checkerboarded land ownership. And so even out in the middle of the Red Desert, there could be private property that's out in the middle of a whole bunch of BLM, and this BLM RMP would have cut landowners off from it. Well, that one was defeated. Thank you, President Trump, and thank you, Representative Hageman. Now, the Buffalo RMP was a little bit different. It focused on coal mining in the energy development in the Powder River Basin. And it was not, basically it said, we're not going to issue any more coal leases after the expiration of the ones that are already in existence. So in effect, it would have shut off all coal mining in the Powder River Basin. And to think that it was, they'll work on these last coal leases and, they're going to go until, 2036 or whatever it was. That wasn't true at all. That was not going to happen. Coal companies, oil companies, all energy companies, they play the long game. And when the end of their run is foreseeable, they start scaling back because they have to go somewhere else to make money. And so that RMP would have destroyed coal mining in Wyoming, which, interestingly enough, Wyoming produces around 30% of the nation's power. So the vast majority of the power in the U.S. comes from the Powder River Basin. So it would effectually turn the light switch off. Well, Harriet went to the floor of the House to argue against that one and yet another RMP. And so let me go ahead and play for you what she had to say on the floor. Here you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of the Congressional Review Act joint resolutions that we are bringing forward to overturn the Biden administration's disastrous and radical resource management plans, beginning with H.J. Res. 104 to repeal the Miles City RMP in Montana to ensure continued access to the Powder River Basin. These Biden-era plans lacked balanced resource management and, in fact, are mineral withdrawals in disguise, which runs contrary to federal law. They lock up America's resources, kill jobs, and undermine energy security. The Miles City Resource Management Plan Amendment, combined with the Buffalo RMP Amendment in Wyoming, bans future coal leasing across the Powder River Basin, which holds roughly 30% of our nation's coal reserves. The Powder River Basin does not just power Montana and Wyoming, however, but our nation at large. The Miles City Plan strips away access to 37.8 billion short tons of coal, which is enough to meet U.S. demand for the next 73 years. The consequences are vast, including higher energy costs for American families, the loss of $46 million annually in Montana state revenue that supports public education, and the elimination of countless high-paying jobs that sustain rural communities. Wyoming knows this fight all too well, where the Buffalo field office was hit with the same environmentalist-driven lawsuits and agency overreach, with bureaucrats pushing no leasing alternatives that amount to nothing more than backdoor energy bans. To this day, I am still baffled and horrified that for 4 years, our government intentionally tried to impose energy poverty on the American people, all to please the vocal but minority climate lobby. When the Powder River Basin turns off, so does America. Energy security is national security. The Biden administration's RMPA undermines both. By restricting access to our own resources, it pushes America towards greater dependence on foreign nations, including our adversaries. I applaud congressional downing of Montana for introducing this joint resolution, which aligns with President Trump's executive orders to reinvigorate America's clean coal and unleash American energy, to restore strength to our energy policy and put the needs of his constituents and all Americans first. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution to restore American energy dominance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the balance of my time.
As Harriet has often said, there is a special place in hell for people who enact policies intended to create energy poverty. And both the Miles City RMP in Montana and the Buffalo RMP are intended to do that very thing, to restrict the production of extractive minerals, coal, natural gas, oil. And here's the thing. Like the folks that are creating these radical environmentalists, which, by the way, there's an article in the Cowboy. The very first thing they do is quote a radical environmentalist from the Wilderness Society. I am baffled how some of these people who have lived in Wyoming their entire lives rely on information from radical environmentalists. And, I spoke at length on the program today about the difference between conservation and, actually, I didn't mention preservation. Let me just talk about that for a minute. So conservation, I already described on the program. That's the responsible use of the resources that you have so that they can continue in perpetuity. That's different than preservation, which is what radical environmentalists want to do. I mean, not that long ago, there was a big blow up about the roadless rule. That's something that Harriet Hageman has been fighting against for a very long time. There are vast areas of the national forest which are considered roadless. And what that means is you can't have motorized vehicles on it. The Cloud Peak Wilderness is one of those. Now, while I'm not in favor of creating roads through, the beautiful places in the high Bighorn Mountains, the truth is you're not going to be able to get roads up there anyway. So, I mean, it's not that big of a danger anyway. But we environmentalists like the Wilderness Society, those folks that were pushing, again, in favor of these RMPs, are interested in preservation. The difference between preservation and conservation is that preservation is to leave something exactly as it is and preserve it. Now, that has a number of downfalls to it when you're talking about wilderness or even grasslands. If you allow environmentalists to enact policies bent on preservation, it creates a giant fire hazard. There is nothing scarier than a wildfire. And if you've never seen one, you don't really want to, because they happen very quickly. And, if you want to know why all that land was burned between Buffalo and Gillette, I mean, that happened in the span of a couple days, and it just goes like that. It's not like a house fire. But if you enact policies bent on preservation, it just creates a giant tinderbox. It endangers the health and welfare of the people that live around it. And we're not just talking about, like, between Buffalo and Gillette, there's a lot of property where nobody lives there. And, you might have a ranch house here or a ranch house here, but really, I mean, there's no concentrated population out there. But that doesn't mean that they're not in danger. A prairie fire can endanger something 50 miles, 100 miles away in the span of a day. Secondly, preservation doesn't allow you to use the resources that God has given us. In Wyoming, it takes a lot of acres to raise a cow, even one cow. And In Wyoming, we do a heck of a job leasing grazing lands, and I understand there's some issues with how we lease land for grazing, but without livestock and the conservation of those lands, the management of them, that is, you create giant fire hazards. Now in the forest, that's pretty easy to see, man. You get down timber all over the place, and it looks like a giant matchstick factory, and it's a giant fire hazard. And there's and if you want your forest to go up in smoke, that's an easy way to do it. Really, what we ought to do is manage those lands responsibly. Allow logging. There are spaces all across the Bighorn Mountains that have been clear cut, and and they don't do it. They don't just take 500 acres and clear cut it. They do it in patches. And they rotate it, just like rotating the crops. You might have corn on this field one year, and then you move it over and you plant something different here. So it continues the life cycle of the land, which is exactly what the principle of conservation. I'm not talking about these misguided folks who allow conservation easements on their property and lock up private property in perpetuity so it can't be used. I'm talking about the responsible use of resources so that it can continue in perpetuity. And the truth is, if you're focused on preservation, if you're one of these nut jobs that thinks that we ought to preserve land, really, in the end, you're not going to have that land because it's going to destroy itself. It's just like a wildlife population that gets too crowded and disease takes over and then ends up killing a whole bunch of animals. So, Democrats, whether it's socialism or preservation or their land management or whatever, they're just a bunch of misguided folks. And rarely do they have a policy or a principle that actually works. I mean, it is absolutely absurd. So there's, according to Fox News, there's a piece on Fox News about yet another military program that we have done away with. And this one should baffle your mind. But the title of the piece is Good Riddance. Hegseth praises the Army dumping command promotion boards aimed at eliminating bias. Now, these programs were use psychological assessments and bias reduction measures to select military leaders. So this is a lot of people make a joke about, hey, we don't really want an airline pilot who was hired because of the color of their skin. This is the same sort of thing. But what the military was doing is giving command promotions to people based on psychological assessments and in an attempt to reduce bias in the military. Not because of their prowess on the battlefield, not because they were an excellent leader. No. It was to reduce bias. And I quote, "The Army has canceled its Command Assessment Program, or CAP, a promotion board that factored psychological assessments and potential biases into leadership considerations. Good riddance," Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth wrote on X. "Promotions across the Department of Defense will only be based on merit and performance." The program, which was implemented broadly across the Army in 2020, which, riddle me this, riddle me that, what also happened in 2020? Oh, yeah, Sleepy Joe Biden. Well, it was aimed at reducing conscious and subconscious biases and using peer assessments and behavioral analysis to choose candidates for command posts. Former Army Secretary Christine Wormuth had formerly deemed CAP an official program of record in January of 2025 before President Donald Trump took office. So this was another one of those things that the Biden administration put in place before President Trump took over in an attempt to thwart exactly what his plans were. Quote, "The battery of psychometric assessments employs several different instruments to measure cognitive capacity, emotional intelligence, conscientiousness, self-awareness, and other behavioral traits," Army documents explaining CAP said. Yeah, that's exactly what I want in a general. Not exactly. Every year, around 2,000 candidates were assessed under CAP for Army leadership positions. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll paused the program and placed it under review last month. The program did not generate greater interest in leadership roles. In fact, it was a abject failure. Around 54% of the Army's eligible senior officers chose not to participate in CAP last year, declining the opportunity to take on a command role. That was up from 40% in 2019. Okay, so 54% chose not to participate. But what about the other 46? Well, this is very similar to the whole discussion on capitalism and socialism. If there was an easy way for somebody to get promoted and thus make more money and have more authority and have greater, status, and not do any more work, of course they're going to take part of it. If they could pass all the psychological tests, they'd get promoted to full bird colonel before they actually earned it. This is yet another program that leftists come up with that maybe I don't know how, but maybe it was good intentioned. But the results of it are disastrous in that you have 46% of the people that were promoted under this program really didn't earn it. Just incredible. Quoting, the Army will now revert to its prior assessment process, Centralized Selection Board Lists, or CSL, for choosing commanding officers. Officers who serve on CSL boards assess a candidate's past assignments, performance, and potential. CAP's credibility was further compromised when General Charles Hamilton, commander of the Army Material Command, was relieved of duty. He was investigated for improperly influencing. Now, here's another problem. This is exactly what I was talking about. He was investigated for improperly influencing the selection process in favor of a lieutenant colonel who had failed her CAP assessment. An inspector general investigation led to his firing in 2024. So let me just break down what happened there for you. So there was an artificial system in place to promote Army officers. And because it wasn't based on merit and wasn't based on performance, then a senior officer manipulated the process to promote somebody who hadn't earned it, because the entire process was contrived anyway, so it really wouldn't matter if he manipulated the process. You see, this is what happens when Democrats and socialists stick their noses into things that they know nothing about. I mean, in the military, fighting and winning wars, we have a long history of as a country, of getting involved in things for reasons that may not necessarily pan out. But people being put in charge of it who don't know anything about fighting a war. One of the best example of that is Vietnam. That was run by politicians. For the most part, it wasn't run by generals. And every Vietnam veteran that I've ever talked to, some of them even in higher positions, have told me the exact same thing. That wasn't a war that was perpetrated by generals, by people who know how to fight and win wars. That was a war that was run by politicians. And with disastrous results, by the way. Now, if you want an example of a war that was fought by a general and not by politicians, look at the first Gulf War. Went in there, kicked butt, took names, and we were in and out, and we had very few casualties. Now, I would argue we should have stuck around. We should have took the oil, all of those things. But we were in and out. We won the war. And really, it was just to kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. But we were effective in doing that because you had Norman Schwarzkopf running things. You didn't have some idiot up in Washington, D.C. who's never marched a day in his life trying to run it. But again, this is another example, this CAP program. It's another example of where, politicians get involved, and radical ones at that, and they really muck up the thing in favor of stupid things like diversity and anti-bias and all of this crap that has nothing to do with the military. The cancellation of the CAP program, in alignment with a June 20th memo from the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, which directed a review of the military officer evaluations and selection processes. In other words, Pete Hegseth is doing his job as we hired him to do. And my friends, there can't be any equivocation on this. The role of the military is to fight and win wars and to be the most deadly fighting force on the face of the planet. It has nothing to do with the color of your skin or where you came from or who your daddy is or where you grew up or anything. So thank God we've got Pete Hegseth. By the way, our Pete is a heck of a lot cooler than is their Pete. Anyway, so I've got about 4 minutes left, but I think that I can give you the long and the short of this. John Thune. John Thune is the reason why a lot of Trump's nominees are languishing. And there's a piece from the Federalist: the biggest hindrance to confirming Trump's nominees is John Thune himself. And let me just read you a couple of the opening paragraphs. Senate Majority Leader John Thune wants GOP voters to believe that Senate Republicans have no ability to speed up the confirmation process. That, my friends, is bullcrap, because there are 140 Trump nominees sitting around the upper chamber, and they haven't even really been confirmed yet or even been voted on. After returning from Congress last month's long August vacation, Thune took to the Senate floor on Tuesday to pin the blame for the continued confirmation delay on the president's appointees squarely on the shoulders of Senate Democrats. Verbally wagging his finger at his leftist colleagues, the majority leader said that their historic obstruction cannot continue. But the truth is that John Thune can schedule votes whenever he wants. All he has to do is go in on a Thursday afternoon after just about everybody has left, schedule some votes, and he can schedule as many as he wants. And he can, if he wants to, he can lock the Senate doors and say, by the way, here's some food, here's some booze. We're not leaving until these people are confirmed. And I guarantee you, after about the 20th vote, the Democrats will be screaming to get out of that chamber, and they'll want to confirm all of them. But the problem is, old John Thune isn't doing it, my friends. And that, my friends, is the biggest problem. Redcoats in positions of leadership. Well, we burned up another busy broadcast hour on 2 hours on the program. Tomorrow, Open Line Friday, all program long. Agent 29 will be back with a report from the meeting that he is currently suffering in, and we'll find out exactly what happened there. But tomorrow, all program long, Open Line Friday. You don't want to miss it. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure that if you missed the podcast from yesterday, go back and listen to it. It is a riot, my friends, and it's absolutely true. You won't believe the amount of school board members that are claiming that I am not a reliable source of news. Yeah, read the bill, read what they did. Yeah, the two don't match. But for now, my friends, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.